All right, we are live. Welcome to the Gadfly, everybody. I'm David Rich, your host. We have a very special guest. We got brother Kristoff Samuel Faust. Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Okay, very excited about this interview, and I don't even want to waste any time with small talk because we already were getting going before the show started. It was intriguing as hell. So let's just get it going. You are a member of the Satanic Temple, correct?
I am.
All right, that's a beautiful springboard into the rest. Why don't you tell us how you got involved in Satanism in the first place, and then on to how you got to join the Temple of Satan? How's that? The
All right.
Satanic Temple, sorry.
I'll parrot our earlier conversation out, but I'll try to make it a little more streamlined
Oh, I'm good,
for the
but
viewers.
okay.
For the viewers.
Right.
But as we talked about before, my first foray into Satanism was actually where I had grown up. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, and in Memphis. Anybody who knows about Memphis knows about the music of Memphis, of individuals such as 3 6 Mafia, Kamikaze Inc., Playa Fly, Crucifix Clan, Lord Infamous, Koopsanika, which they all are very open about like Satanism. I mean, 3 6 Mafia, 666 Mafia. They didn't exactly make it like hidden back in the day, and their music was very open, like very open about the Satanism.
Hmm.
So growing up, and they did it as more of like kind of a way of a show of being like, look at how evil we are. We worship the devil. So their Satanism was very much the negative Satanism.
Right.
It was very much the standard and direct antagonism to the positive Satanism that I represent nowadays. And I will give the disclaimer that I speak for myself as a Satanist. I cannot speak for the Satanic Temple. I am myself an ordained minister of Satan within the Satanic Temple, but that does not mean I myself am can officially speak for the Satanic Temple in any capacity. Um,
Understood.
but my first foray into organized Satanism would have been the Church of Satan, which is everybody's first foray into organized Satanism because Anton LaVey was the first like open Satanist, and the Church of Satan was the first organized satanic group that actually operated within the public sphere in any sort of meaningful capacity. I mean, prior to that, you had individuals such as the Ordo Templar Orientis, such as Anton LaVey, Telema. You had the Church of I forgot the word for it. It's the church where they actively worship Satan as an aspect of human emotion, which is similar to what we do, but they were very much theistic and idealist about it, as opposed to our more atheist materialist approach to Satanism and ritual magic. But that is a question I can answer on a further time. Right now, it's about how I got into Satanism, or it's specifically, which then segued to how I got into the Satanic Temple. Um, I fell out of Satanism around age of 16 when I joined the fire department, and I was becoming more like a straight laced kind of Boy Scout type. I spent 3 years from 16 to 19 serving as a volunteer firefighter. I grew an addiction to the adrenaline rush, to the thrill of the danger, as well as I love the idea of helping people out made me feel nice. It was one of those things where I did not need a God. I did not need anybody to tell me to helping people out. Like the feeling of like cutting somebody out of a wrecked vehicle and seeing the look in their eyes when they went from fearing for their entire life to when they look at you in your full turnout gear, when you think you would look horrifying, but as far as they're aware, you are a literal guardian angel here to save them from a damning situation. That feels nice. And so I figured at first I was going to join the FDNY because I was not too far away from FDNY, the Fire Department of New York, for those who aren't aware of the acronym. But I decided, no, let me join the Marine Corps instead. Joined the Marine Corps, spent 2 campaigns in Afghanistan, both in Helmand Province, one in Shragazi, the other in Kajaki Dam. Very kinetic. I was not the type of individual to show up in Afghanistan and not do anything. Actually, quite frankly, as we were talking about before, there's actually a New York Times article about my unit, where if I was to give my government name, you can look up where it says on the cover with my face and the rest of my squad, fighting in the war in the most dangerous part of Afghanistan. And it speaks in that New York Times article about our first firefight, which was about a 2-hour firefight, and we were cut off and like behind enemy lines. And had to fight our way out when everybody was trying to fucking kill us. Pardon my French, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But everybody was very unhappy with our presence in the nation, which I will say right now, as a veteran, I am very anti-war. We had no play business being there. I can tell you, as somebody who was there personally, we had no business being there. And I can tell you, I have no hard feelings for anybody over there who shot at me, because I know I would shoot at me too if I was in their situation. But again, that's neither here nor there. That builds into the loss. That builds into it actually does directly build into what led to my Satanism in a way we didn't discuss, which was a more profound way, which is personal to me. During 2020, I was attending university at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign as an electrical engineer, a student electrical engineer.
Oh, I partied there plenty of times.
Right. I did really well. I did up to 4.0 GPA. Was able to get into the University of Illinois. Was going to go to school to be. I was specializing in data science because I was going to work on. I was going to go get my PhD in artificial intelligence. Oh, unfortunately, the University of Illinois does not take too kindly to political activism. So during the 2020 protests, they reacted. At that time, I was a member of the Anarcho Rifle Association.
Nice.
Before we were shut down, brutalized, more than shut down. And we had an alliance with a local anti-racist coalition. So we were very active with the, it was actually an incident of chalk. When we used chalk to write on the concrete in front of the university, and the university decided to use that as an example of destruction of government property, or the destruction, yes, defacement of public property. So they actually deployed their law enforcement agencies against us to the point where up to many things that happened, which this is just one of the many things. I was taken on a ride by law enforcement personnel to a hotel room, and they didn't tell me anything about where I was going or why I was going there. And I had to text all of my comrades in activism and let them know I was not suicidal and that I had no plans on hurting myself if anything happened to me. That was, so needless to say, the University of Illinois and I had something of a moral disagreement on the my position as a Black man in American society. So I had, for a brief time, had some collaboration with the new Black Panther Party, but I respect them for everything they're doing. And so again, I'm all about solidarity. So what I'm about to say next is not going to be anything about dog on the new Black Panther Party. They're not the original Black Panther Party, right, as everybody knows, and as a legacy, descendant of original Black Panther guerrillas, it's not. Their dogma is entirely different. I myself am a communist, Marxist-Leninist, because it is our heritage. As Panther, it is my personal heritage as well. The new Black Panthers they're more of the Nation of Islam kind of Black nationalist Islamic types, which again, that's fine for them. It's not my thing. So I had kind of drifted out of the activism kind of thing. And I will stress the activism is what drove me to TST in the first place. Yeah. However, TST is not only activism. Again, this is my personal Satanism as opposed to the Satanic Temple as a whole. But it was actually for the Kansas City Legion of the Missouri congregation. It was actually, they host semi-regular movie nights on the Satanic Temple of Missouri forum on Facebook, which is an open forum for anybody who would want to go in and actually talk to Satanists and figure out and see if this is something they want to do, can go to that forum. And we host a lot of public events such as the movie night, which before I was a full member, I would attend the movie night, mainly just because I thought it was they played a lot of horrible B-rate movies that I would get high as hell and sit there and watch. And they say, and the TSC members, even before I was a TSC member, knowing they were Satanists, they were all cool as hell. TSC's radical inclusivity, so it's everybody there is all about, as long as you're not an asshole, they're gonna love you the same as anybody else. And so I just truly enjoyed hanging out with them. So when I initially joined the Satanic Temple, it was mainly out of a sense of camaraderie, where I heard that they had stuff to do with political activism. And so I'm like, I like them. I like their mission. I like where their head's at. So I can get behind that, even though I, at that time, didn't have any Satan still is a tool for most of us, for all of us really, but I didn't even have anything to do with Satan as a religion at that sense. Whereas this segues into actually what I'm doing now as a member of the Satanic Temple, because when I jumped to the Satanic Temple, I jumped into the ground running, because it's like I can wax poetic about the great stuff the Satanic Temple does all day, but I will keep it very concise onto one of the many, many, many things they do, which makes them easily, in my opinion, the best bet for any real activism to get ahead in this nation at the moment. Yes, for so many reasons, not even personal reasons, but objectively analytical reasons.
Yeah.
For my one of my many hats I'm doing right now is actually turning TST into codifying the religious aspect of it, because we are a religion. Like, our history is, we started off as a form of weaponized satire for an gross oversimplification. But as the movement actually picked up steam, and we realized that no, like, this is something we could really use to make lives better, that's when the decision was made to make it into a legitimate religious movement. But then it came the hard part of, we have to make a religion. Like, this isn't us just coming out and just digging up some old dusty old tombs and being like prophecy, or piggybacking off of like a pre-existing religion like Christianity, being like, well, this is our take on the Bible. I mean, we use Satan in the sense that we're piggybacking off a pre-existing religion, but it's only because Satan itself is a symbol. As far as religious aspect is concerned, we had to start from ground. We are still starting from ground zero. Like, as the Satanic Ministry does a plethora of different things depending on the wants, desires of the individual minister and whatever campaign that the minister decides to pursue. Myself and a couple of us, we decided to focus mainly on the religious aspect, which comes into, which will help us, which I started with the argument of, well, how does one define an atheist religion? Which is usually the hardest part.
Tricky.
Yes. Which, it's kind of tricky at first until you actually take a step back and and this is not me trying to be, full of myself at all. You can ask anybody in the Satanic Temple if they know Brother Faust. I am a labyrinthine pit of random facts. And so we can easily spend the next hour talking about a single thing, and I will have something new to talk about that single object. Okay. So I'm going to try my hardest to keep this simplified, and how to define a religion. A religion is, in a gross oversimplification, a defined set of morals and ethics which a nation has decided to live their life based off of. Which then you can come into like various other things like, well, what constitutes a nation, which is beyond the scope of this conversation. But then a great book to look into that is actually Marxism and the National Question by Joseph Stalin, which was actually that book actually had a huge influence on the Black Power movement, because most original Black Power individuals such as Harry Haywood used Joseph Stalin as the springboard for Black national identity. And it was because of like books such as Marxism and the National Question, which for the first question of like, what constitutes a nation? And what constitutes a nation is like, among many things, a shared geographic location, a shared language, a shared code of morals and ethics, a shared shared economic responsibility. Which is why when you think of like nations, which is why you, as somebody who interviews leftists, can talk about how in the Black community we refer to our individual neighborhoods as nations. And that is why we refer to our individual neighborhoods as nations, or even our, what white folks call gangs and what I will call a tribal militia. Right. Even our tribal militias refer to themselves as nations. For instance, CRIP stands for Community Restoration and Progress. The Crips are a smaller part of the Folks Nation, which was started by the Black folks. I mean, everybody knows about the Folks Nation. You're in Illinois. I don't have to explain to y'all in Illinois. Y'all started that shit. Usually I'm talking to folks in Missouri and Tennessee who ain't as used to that.
That's okay. Feel free to explain it. That's fine. But no, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Right. But like it's where it comes from. The idea of nations, the Black community comes from, because we recognize that within the territories of the United States, we exist as a separate nation. This goes back to the duality of Black consciousness that W.B. Du Bois talks about when he talks about in his seminal book, The Souls of Black Folks. about how us as Black Americans, we cannot identify, and I can only speak for Black Americans. I try to keep my theory extremely broad and comprehensive, so like anybody can pick it up and run with it. I mean, because I can only speak for Black Americans, even though I didn't, even though it's by every other standard in the world, it's hard for me to identify as Black because I'm 60% African, like 15 to 30% Irish. Anywhere outside the United States, I would just be colored, but in the United States, we like to oversimplify things. So it's
interesting.
so. But if you go to South Africa, for instance, I mean, there's no Black folk in South Africa. Zulu, Xhosa, you go down there and you say, "Oh, are you Black?" We're all Black out here, bro.
Right.
So when I refer, so it's why I've been kind of off topic, but I'll get around to the original topic.
That's right.
I refer to myself as a Black citizen of a nation within of an occupied nation within the territory of the United States.
Yeah.
But how this comes back around to the religion thing is when we think of religion, we think of idealist religions. And now, when I'm talking about idealism, I'm talking about idealism in the Hegelian sense. Idealism in the sense that the soul came first. Now, the biggest question between Hegel and Marx, when people come back to a lot of the philosophical dialectic between right dialectics and Hegelianism and left dialectics Marxism, which boils down to the oversimplification of communism versus capitalism. Its base most antagonism comes from the concept of materialism versus idealism,
right.
Which came first, the mind or the body. For if the body came first, we will do everything as we can to make our life comfortable here on this earthly realm. Whereas if the mind came first, we prepare for what comes afterwards. So capitalism is based off of largely quasi-religious ideals, oftentimes based off of directly religious ideals, with this current conflation with fundamental evangelicism. So capitalism on its fundamental level is based off idealist principles, which is why you look at the hierarchical nature of capitalism, and you'll get rationalist philosophers like Jordan Peterson and Jonathan Perdue, who argue for capitalism by using the argument that we need a hierarchy and equality, and that hierarchy and equality are necessary and are signs of a morally advanced culture in their mind. But it comes from the idealist perspective. So then you come at a communist like me, who comes back and fires back with how asinine I view that as. I'm firing back from a materialist perspective of arguing that no, all of my ideas, the morals and ethics, and the way we present ourselves need to be within the material realm. Now that comes into where religion comes to play. And our largely Eurocentric Western United States, like the classical Greco-Roman education, we harken back to the education of individuals such as Plato and Aristotle. And I might be skipping some stuff because I'm used to talking to Satanists, who a lot of this stuff is already kind of like implied, like it's kind of considered like house of knowledge among Satanists, but outside of the satanic community, I might skip some things. So if there's certain things that don't make sense, please don't hesitate to ask me to elaborate upon it.
I'm with you so far. I know I have a philosophy degree. I'm aware of the materialistic dialectic and the idealistic. I know the distinction.
Awesome.
Yeah, no, I'm all over all of this. I got you.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, so we are on the same page here.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. But so you understand, like, I mean, so harking back to something that you probably haven't touched on in a while is the cave metaphor that Plato
used. The allegory of the cave, sure.
Yeah, in the Republic, when the allegory of the cave was the first that really built in the concept of like, and this is more for the audience as I'm talking to you, you're all aware of, but the concept of like the purpose, the essence of something, the spirit of something. So how do you determine something's essence and its purpose? Which it's that argument has evolved over time in a plethora of divergent ways. Everything from the existentialist of Heidegger, existentialism of Heidegger, to the current we're talking about the current rationalism of Peterson. Whereas even though I disagree and so much with Peterson and Perdue, as any good philosopher should, you should listen to those you disagree with to figure out why you disagree with them, to reinforce your point. Which Marx. The whole point of Marx, his whole thing is literally just taking everything from Hegel, because he disagreed with everything Hegel stood for, but he agreed with Hegel's method and decided to use the critique of Hegel as a way of improving what he thought was a sound method, but a flawed philosophy. That's why I like to think of myself as doing with communism with Peterson and Pague. Because
that's actually really interesting, real quick, because the dialectic part of it is a method. It's thesis, antithesis, synthesis.
Oversimplification. You're talking Hegelian dialectic. I'm talking Marxist dialectic. And even in the Hegelian dialectic, that thesis, antithesis, and synthesis is an after the fact thing, which has nothing to do with the original concept of dialectic. It was a more of an after the fact thing, which was influenced by the original concept of dialectics.
No, that's true. If you take dialectic back to Socrates and Plato's writings, it did not mean A and not A simultaneously equaling B or something like that.
Well, it depends. That's the thing. It depends on the dialectics you're looking at. That means it's exactly that with Hegelian dialectics, but with the Marxist
Hegelian, right?
With the Marxist dialectics, it's simply the fact that Marxists believe that all of reality in human history is based off the movement between objects as opposed to objects themselves, which is where that Marxist dialectic comes into place. So
okay, go
on. Back around to the Greco-Roman thing about like Peterson and Pague is they argued on their, and I'm gonna give them a plug even though I disagree with them because so you know which podcast I disagree with. It's the one when he's covering the symbolism between behind Carl Jung and Genesis. From a Gnostic mysticist point of view, which it is a very fast, even though I am a materialist atheist, it's so fascinating. The mystic arts are so fascinating, which is exactly why, as an atheist, I got into Satanism to find an atheist take on the mystic arts, which is we'll get into that in a minute. The concept of sorry. I sat on my sunglasses. I was making sure I didn't break them by accident.
Oh, geez. Do that.
They're fine. They're fine.
They're
fine. The concept of religion is, since we're so used to that idealist concept of religion, we're used to the necessity of there being a God. If you want to look at one of the closest things we have to a Bible in the Satanic Temple, you can look at Revolt of the Angels by Anatole France, a book I cannot recommend enough. But in Revolt of the Angels, he refers to the Gnostic representation of God as in referring to him as a Yaldabaoth the Demiurge, where you have the two different levels of godhood. You have the Demiurge, which is the guy who created the material universe, which I have a empiricist, rationalist, scientific theory on God later, if you're curious to hear it.
Sure.
But the second God that they talk about in Gnosticism is a greater God, which exists on a level beyond our comprehension in every capacity, and beyond God's comprehension in every capacity. Where if you want to go back to the Hegelian concept, you can go into the concept of the supersensible versus the sensible. You can refer to like Yaldabaoth as the god of moonness, is a supersensible, and Yahweh as the super god, if you want to call him that, as the god of the supersensible. But so when it comes into the atheism side of things, there's really not much of a stretch in saying that atheists can have a religion. It's just a matter of how can you argue for a code of morals and ethics without Yaldabaoth or a Demiurge to tell you how to live your life. Because there's a lot of people who argue that if you don't have a God to tell you how to live your life, humans are naturally going to go out of their way to harm each other, which is false. Individuals such as that, they're telling on themselves. They're saying that they would commit crimes if they didn't have any fear of some unforeseen sky daddy to punish them. It's the same thing as individuals saying that everybody's a little racist. No, it's not true at all. If you say everybody's a little racist, it's because you're a little racist and you're trying to justify the fact that you're racist by projecting your racism on other people who themselves might not be racist.
So do you know who Jane Elliott is?
Oh, sounds so familiar, and I'm gonna be mad that I can't.
No, it's okay. She's a sweet little teacher lady who just she's done a lot for anti-racism. She's brought up a lot of good points for sure, but she's just convinced that all white people are racist. So when you said that, like it just doesn't make any sense to me at all. And I'm very sensitive to racism. I hate racism. Always have. I'm a member of the Green Party. I host a show on Mondays concerning it. I've had many conversations about this, and I not for a second do I buy that every single white person's racist.
That is actually a whole different beast. That is actually a problem with anti-intellectualism in the BIPOC community, which is actually an issue we are actually tackling as the BIPOC community of TST, which is one of our major things. And as the BIPOC community of TST is trying to tackle like anti-intellectual movements in the BIPOC community, which are usually overcorrections of reactions to very valid like grievances of racism we still deal with, but then oftentimes some of us overcorrect and become the very thing that we demonize. And we actually
you start generalizing. That's kind of the intellectual foundations of racism. Is you take one person and you generalize their character. That's it. Okay.
In the satanic BIPOC community, and coming up here soonish, we don't know when exactly. We're actually going to have a panel where we discuss anti-intellectualism in the BIPOC community and how we view as intellectuals in the satanic BIPOC community, how we view that rationalists and empiricists should approach anti-intellectualists in the BIPOC community, especially because anti-intellectuals in the BIPOC community will knee-jerk react by accusing anybody who doesn't agree with them as being a house nigger or a house slave or somebody or an automata-like. It's a very lazy way of trying to defend a very lazy, ideology. But again, that's neither here nor there. It's my way of saying I agree with you, and we are going to talk around the satanic community. But
clearly, we're going to have you back on more than one time.
I'm okay with that because folks tend to. I am not an arrogant man as far as my opinions are concerned, but I like to talk just because I find talking fun. And folks,
good conversation is why I started this show, and I have like 3 radio shows and another podcast. I mean, no, I love it. So like, you're making my job easy. Just one question and off you go. That's fantastic. Real quick though, before you continue, let me ask you this: do you have to be an atheist in order to be a part of the temple, the Satanic Temple?
That's a tricky question there.
Can you be a theistic Satanist?
I can tell you this from my. It's hard to say because Satanism is a very individualist religion. So
there are theistic satanic, or would you say left-hand path? The Temple of Set is a theistic offshoot of the Church of Satan. There's Luciferian groups all over the place, which is more of a theistic for sure. But I mean, is it like a rule? Do you have to be an atheist to be in the? Go ahead, sorry.
What I was saying, I don't mean to sound that. I hope that didn't seem like it's me. What I was saying is very individualist, even within specific satanic sects. So even within the Satanic Temple is very individualist. Now I'll tell you what our written dogmatism is. Our written dogmatism is that we will approach everything with agnosticism in all things. But however, that comes into the aspect of, well, how do you define agnosticism? Because I'm an atheist, I'm an agnostic, but like I said, I can argue to you how I can feel like I can scientifically argue the existence of God. I just don't believe in the existence of God in the superstitious deistic sense that Christians do. So, again, it sounds like I'm overcomplicating a simple question, but we are a very complicated group. So, no. You don't have to be an atheist to be in the Satanic Temple, but your personal views will be in direct antagonism with most of the Satanic Temple's views. So you're going to have to be okay with the idea that you are free to believe whatever you want, but the rest of the Satanic Temple are not going to honor that belief as valid.
Gotcha. Yep. Okay, that makes sense for sure. Okay. But so back to the whole religion, the religiosity of the temple, though it's atheistic, and the bringing those two things together, which I think, like we said at the beginning, some people would consider a tricky field to traverse through in order to get that accomplished. But some people wouldn't. Obviously, I know. I mean, the Church of Satan was a religion, and it's atheistic, and there you go. I mean, I don't know what else to tell you. If you don't agree with the conceptual combination of religion and atheism, that's your hang up, but some people don't mind it. But I wanted to ask you, is there any sort of but I still know that like when people tend to like or combine religion and atheism, they take the religious explanation that we're used to, that it's actually all comes from this supernatural deity, and they might make it mostly psychological. These things are metaphors. They're archetypes of the mind. They're dispositions. They're forces of nature in a very non-personified sense. So is that what you would say? Okay, go ahead.
Yes, that's exactly what I'd say. Okay. I have my complaints, myriad complaints about Carl Jung.
Sure.
But just like Hegel and Heidegger, who Heidegger is probably one of my favorite philosophers, and he's a literal fucking Nazi, and this is coming from a black Satanist communist.
Isn't that crazy? Wasn't that crazy? Like I remember, like I first heard of Heidegger just as a philosopher, and then I heard that I was like, whoa, whoa, what happened?
Yeah.
How does any philosopher with that amount of rationality, rational training in rationality, do that? I mean, that's crazy. Anyway, sorry.
But it's like
ethics is a branch of philosophy, for fuck's sakes, man. I mean, he didn't study ethics. All right.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, his whole thing about being in time was his argument on the postmodern nature of ethics. That was his argument.
Right.
And his idea ethics was like postmodern thing, which it is, which sucks. Ethics is an entirely postmodern thing. You know what I mean? There is no purpose to reality. There is no God. We have no reason to be here. Nothing we do matters. There is nothing punishing us for doing good, for doing bad things. You can easily be a shitty person and win at life, but you should still be a good person. And it becomes a hard part of arguing that.
Yeah.
But like, which a good way to start, which the first hurdle to come over is we already conquered the idealist rationalist hurdle, idealist materialist hurdle. But like another hurdle you can jump over that is then going into my personal favorite book, which is actually my first book that radicalized me. Peter Kropotkin's A Mutual Aid, A Fact of Revolution, A Fact of Evolution, not revolution. It's a fact of revolution, but it's a fact of evolution is the title. The gross oversimplification is that people are inherently good and want to help each other out, and that the concept of people being bad and wanting to fuck each other over was a byproduct of Hobbes and Smith with Leviathan and the Wealth of Nations, taking Darwin, who didn't even agree with that, in Ascent and Descent of Man specifically said he did not agree in Survival of the Fittest, meaning Survival of the Strongest, and ignoring the gross mental gymnastics that oversimplifies the food web, which is not a food chain, it's a food web. I'm sorry, the herbivores are the more dangerous ones. I'm more scared of the hippo than I am of the fucking lion. But it boils down to using a whole bunch of, and I can give scientific backing all day, but we have only 30 minutes left, and we're only barely into the first question.
Right.
But like,
which is awesome.
Yeah, awesome for us. I mean, the audience is probably like, well, we want to hear the rest of it. But to boil it down, and this could be an excuse for me to come back on the show to talk about Kropotkin specifically, to keep things more like concise. But like Kropotkin argues very convincingly that people want to help each other out. That survival of the fittest is actually a natural, and it shows why you have to force it by using like a state-sanctioned violence, because people don't want to be that way. And so, and which comes back into Satan as a liberator, and satanic religion as liberating the individual from the despotic chains of capitalist propaganda of demanding that you fuck over your neighbor. Because in this satanic religion, we use the morals, the ethics, and the philosophy, the history, and the life to argue about the efficacy and the validity of the golden rule, and how it just makes sense from a purely survival standpoint to be nice to other people. So morals and ethics make sense. It feels good because it feels good to help each other out. But also, like, I'm sorry, life is a lot better when you're smoking with friends than when you're smoking alone, you know? Like, Bone Thugs and Harmony hits different when you got company. Like the crossroads.
Yeah, I don't know how people could think for a second that they don't need other people.
Well, some people don't, but those people are generally, some people don't. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, some people don't.
I mean, maybe emotionally or psychologically they don't, but I mean, materialistically, I mean, just. Well,
some people.
First of all, you were born social. Your mother was right there. Secondly,
right.
I mean, and after that, people had to raise you. They had to take care of you. They had to feed you. All that. I mean, you wouldn't have gotten to any point, even if you're living on a mountain by yourself at the age of 60. You needed people to get to that point. I mean, life doesn't happen without other people. That's just ridiculous. All right, sorry.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, that comes back to the whole thing about like dialectics, which is why I always argue that communism is a philosophy about life, not a philosophy of politics. Because communism, like a lot of the communism, to really understand it, it takes you to understand like historical materialism, which I mean, like the first foray into the German ideology, which touches on what we talked about earlier about the relationship between object and society being the movement of those objects in society, not the objects themselves. in the Marxist sense, the class struggle as opposed to the actual class themselves. But like you need to understand that kind of like interplay between the forces in society and societal and and the means of production, how it plays in those forces in society, which requires such a working foundation on a level which is beyond simple politics. I mean, this is beyond like trying to writing a law. This is how individuals survive as families on a whole, which is where the religiosity of Satanism comes into place. Now, when it comes down to the religious practice, which is another thing which people always oftentimes find like lacking in atheist religions, I actually have a very, very ascetic religious practice as a Satanist. It's funny because like we are, even though it is an atheist religion and there's the restrictions I place on myself are strictly self-imposed. I choose to for my religious practice, and to go over a brief overview of my religious practice is I amalgamate. I come from a voodoo background. My mom's side of the family, Haitian voodoo. Actually, my mom's side of the family actually came up from Haiti through Louisiana as veterans from the Haitian Revolution. So actually came up freeborn. And my grandmother practiced hoodoo. She didn't practice voodoo because she was still a practicing Christian, but she still practiced the magic. So she practiced hoodoo until the day she died.
Santeria? Isn't Santeria kind of a combination of the two, or am I
Cuban?
Huh?
Cuban. Hoodoo's Haitian. Voodoo is Haitian. Santeria is Cuban. That's the only difference. Gotcha. Same God, same practice. It's just difference of language, different of geography, different. Like,
obviously, not something you know much about. Okay.
But
hi Christine, real quick. Hi Christine. Hi Terry. All right, go ahead.
I amalgamate like the hoodoo practice into my personal because even though I don't believe in the spiritual aspect, the ritual of doing it still brings me comfort. And so, including on top of that, I amalgamate ideas of the hierarchy of needs for self-individuation.
Yep.
Use a lot of shadow work, which Carl Jung spearheaded. Use a lot of chaos magic.
I love chaos magic.
I take everything from Aleister Crowley that doesn't make him a piece of shit and try to use it in my daily life, because there's a lot of Aleister Crowley that's a piece of shit.
He did some not so great things. We also wouldn't be having this conversation without him.
Yeah, Heidegger, art for the artist. Phil Anselmo with heavy metal, for fuck's sake, you know. Like, I love if walk comes on, I'm gonna mosh, but I mean it doesn't stop the fact that Phil Anselmo pops with Nazi salute and screams white power on stage, you know, separating the art from the artist.
Exactly.
Chaos magic. Yeah. Back on the chaos magic thing. It's mindfulness. Chaos magic is like for like the folks, the audience who don't know, it's just ritualized mindfulness. He just took a lot of the mindfulness of Eastern traditions and turned it into a way that Anglophones can actually understand. In the morning, I wake up, I do a contemplation ritual, which is I have my voodoo shrine, which I set up like no different than if I was practicing voodoo. I've got the red cloth for the ogu. I've got my 9mm to represent and my hunting knife to represent the war, because the ogu are the warrior spirits. Got the alcohol down there because the ogu they love their alcohols. Rum especially is a big part of the ogu. The candles, the water, all the like. But when I'm using the names and the images I'm using will be satanic in origin as opposed to voodoo, even though I'm using a voodoo method. And where the chaos magic comes into place is I wake up in the morning, light the altar, light the incense. I recite an actual poem, if not a poem, a prayer. See if I've actually got it here. If folks want a satanic prayer,
do it.
That's actually made by me, I'm a minister of Satan, so I'm assuming so. I guess the satanic prayer is illegally.
Yeah, no, that's your domain. I mean, you're clergy.
So it's a prayer for a battle. It's a Promethean battle prayer, is what I've titled it.
Nice.
recite this before I meditate. I heed the call of duty. Against the uncaring umbra of the void, I stand as an unyielding aegis against the anathema of Christian piety and the chains of ignorance. With fire and perdition, I consecrate my ragged and material form. Through blood and iron, I baptize myself in the Vulcan forges of Gehenna. With prognostication, I face the uncertain future so that the meek need not hide. I am the bane of the holy and the Promethean herald of forbidden knowledge. I am the unholy fury of the forsaken and the flaming sword of the downtrodden. I shall throw myself upon the sacrificial pyre of revolution, and I shall know no fear. It is done. Hail Satan, hail Anansi, hail Lilith.
Oh, that's
And
awesome. That is definitely a satanic prayer. That was beautiful.
oh, thank you. Actually, borrowed liberally for the nerds in the audience from the battle prayers to God Emperor of Mankind that the Space Marines recite before they go into a battle against the Imperium's enemies. If anybody here is a Warhammer 40k fan,
All right.
but uh, uh, um, but then I'll meditate. I use concentration meditation. I'll focus on the water. It's kind of using as kind of like a scrying, like a ball of swords, like a crystal ball of swords, where I let whatever images that may like appear come to me because I'll use them as ways to approach my own psychological profile. So it's kind of, even though psychoanalysis is a very, very, very fringe pseudoscience. So like the idea of dream analysis and the idea of like analyzing visions and the like is a pseudoscience. I will say that as an individual who practices it. It also, but for me, it personally offers a poetic way of approaching self-analysis because clinical self-analysis is boring. I'm a poet, as the prayer shown. I love poetry. I love art. So I'm going to want to use art as a way to approach my own psychological profile.
Then that works.
Which is what the ritual will be. It's artistic expression manifested as religious practice. But how it manifests in actual benefits is, I mean, well, the mindfulness of meditation has proven like psychologically it works. I mean, and on top of that, like a mindfulness exercise and meditation, it causes very real physical changes in the brain, which are extremely beneficial. This is something that has been like covered in like universities, from University of like Urbana-Champaign to Johns Hopkins. This is just common knowledge at this point. The woo factor is there, but like meditation itself is objectively healthy. And on top of that, the meditation I do, like the staring into the scrying, of staring into like a scrying object, whether it be a crystal ball or water in my own personal voodoo sense, it forms, it's the concentration form of meditation, which as an individual such as myself, who has like really like bad problems with ADHD and problems with focus, it helps me really work on focusing by forcing me to focus. And then afterwards, I will, if you want to, where I got this from, if anybody's wondering, is Modern Magic by Donald Craig.
Kraig. Yeah.
Yes, you know who he is. Then
that's a classic.
yes.
Oh, that's absolutely.
Yes, it's a literal textbook on chaos magic.
It's literally
with review exams and everything.
Yeah.
But and fun fact for those in the audience who are interested in possibly being part of the Satanic Temple, I have been toying around with the idea of actually starting a chaos magic course through the Satanic Temple because we have a lot of chaos magicians in the ministry using that textbook as the course material for individuals who want to take the course. It'd be entirely free. So, I mean, that is a very, very, very broad and a very in concept in the prototype stage because I have plenty of other projects I'm working on, but it is definitely something I really, really want to get around to.
Very cool.
Chaos magic is beautiful.
Hey, real quick, Christine Totten is here. She says, can I ask what leads someone to follow this religion? I'm assuming she means the Satanic Temple. And Christine, he's kind of going through that whole process right now. A brief recap. He started off as a Satanist in a different way, and then became. Well, you know what? Why don't you summarize it?
Well, I'll actually use additional information to reinforce the point. So I'm not gonna like tell everybody, like repeat myself for everybody else who's already been here. In my mind, Satanism is the most liberating thing that I, as a black man, could ever hope to do. Religion as a black man could ever hope to take. I will not bow. I will not bend the knee to Islam, because Islam was another form of subjugation of the African peoples. North Africa was subjugated by Islam. In South Africa, the racial slur for black folks is kafir, which is it was a Dutch bastardization of the Arabic word of kafir, which means non-believer. So it was just another word for infidel. Christianity was like the African Holocaust, the Mafa, the transatlantic slave trade, was justified by Christianity. It was Christianity.
All the Bible-based religions are fucking bullshit. I mean, they're all just slave, condoning slavery, and it doesn't even pull any punches. I mean, the New Testament says you're supposed to be a slave to Christ. Oh, fuck you! I'm not a slave to anybody. And there's so many moral problems with that bullshit.
Which is why the first black intellectuals turned towards communism as a way to reject the Christian God, since communism is an atheist, a political tool. But communism has its downfalls. Satanism comes into play, where communism provides a lot of theory as far as social, political practice is concerned. Satanism provides that same thing as far as morals and ethics are concerned. So God and Christ represent chains. It represents the things that put my people on the plantation in the first place. The fact that that my legal name is a very Anglo-Saxon name and not the name of my ancestors, and I have no understanding of the original tribe I came from, is a direct result of imperialist, capitalist Christianity, theocracy. Thus, Satanism is my way of rejecting my chains. Satanism is my way of emancipating myself from the mental plantation. My journey to hell is my trip down the mental underground railroad to total mental emancipation, where I no longer rely on a Christian God to tell me my worth. I no longer rely on Uncle Sam to tell me to give me my rights back as a black man when I always had my rights.
Right.
It is not up to the Christian God to decide what my rights are, and up to the white acolytes of the Christian God to decide what the rights I deserve back. That is my right as a black man. So I assume my right as a Satanist to retain that right, to slay the Christian God and free my tribe from servitude. And that, in a poetic way, is what drives me as a black man.
Can you see Satanism? This? I don't know how well I can do this.
I see Blood King.
It's a sword with blood dripping down. It's Christ's crown of thorns at the hilt, with blood dripping off of it, and it's a lyric from a heavy metal song from the 80s by a band named Manowar. So it's
Manowar.
It says, "So the blood on your sword is the blood of a king."
Okay, yeah. All right.
Speaking of slaying him.
Yep.
All right, go ahead.
Speaking of 80s bands, one of my first bands I got into, Deicide.
Nice.
Are the 80s or 90s? I mean, that's neither here nor there. We can talk about music on another thing. But right. The Miss Lady who asked the question wanted to know what drove me to Satanism, and that also drives what drove the rest of the BIPOC community to Satanism as well. Is because we view it as it's a necessity to free our people from the chains of Christian ignorance. It is our obligation. It's when the abolitionists ran on the Underground Railroad, they could have easily stayed in the North and forgotten about their brethren down South. No, just as when Plato said it is up to a philosopher to come back to that cave to inform individuals of what they had seen, it is up to the freedmen to come back to the plantation to take their brothers and sisters and everybody in between, because I'm all about the non-binary folks. I'm cishet, but I'm a militant ally. I will punch a motherfucker for being bigoted towards the LGBTQI+ community. So we got the brethren, we got our sistren, and we got our idren. Our idren are our non-binary folks. Nice. So I would just use idren as a way to refer to everybody. Okay. So whenever, if you're it's up to the freed individual, the freed person, to come back to free their idren who are still on the plantation. So in the modern plantation of capitalism, of the Democratic Party, of all these black intellectuals who have forgotten to face their father, to use a gunslinger reference, the Satanic Temple and Idren Satanic Temple, we are, in our opinions, in our minds, I will objectively say, the first of the generation to be the fully conscious of the BIPOC individuals in the United States. and we are trying to make sure to elevate everybody else in the BIPOC community to our same level. Now, it's difficult to pull it off, though, because religion, sadly, is the only thing that kept the BIPOC community together, which makes a double-edged sword for a lot of BIPOC individuals who themselves are members of the LGBTQI plus community or are themselves aren't very religious, because now they've got to turn their back on their, it's like to walk out of the church in the Black communities, to walk out on your neighborhood. So also with the Satanic Temples, we provide BIPOC individuals who recognize the fallacy of organized religion, but don't have any way to be able to leave whatever cult it is, has the control over their nation. We offer them an escape from their cult. Cult being whatever Abrahamic cult controls them, whether it be Islamic or Christian, whatever Abrahamic cult controls them. We offer them an escape from said cult. And we offer a lot of stuff that you just won't, most BIPOC individuals just wouldn't be afforded. Like, for instance, right now, toying with the idea of making a play, a musical. Like, in the streets of where I came from, I wasn't going to be able to make a damn musical. You know what I mean? It's or like, and like I have a bunch of projects, which is not a matter of like if, it's a matter of like having the time, because everybody in TST, all the active members, everybody are brilliant. Everybody are passionate. We have a plethora of resources because we all come together and pull our resources together. So it's the sky's the limit with us. Like, the only thing that's holding us back right now is the fact that we just don't have enough people and enough time to make all of our dreams come to fruition. But we have a labyrinthine amount of things, which the Satanic Temple are going to like have our hand in future, and notwithstanding. For instance, Project Emoja is one thing that we've been working on with the BIPOC community in the Satanic Temple, which Emoja is the Swahili word for unity, working on intersectionality. Because as my experience at the University of Illinois has shown, is that even the most open-minded white ally can oftentimes prove to be the most destructive bigot in the face of minority struggles. And an example I can give is an individual I was in the electrical engineering program with. He was a very intellectual, very analytical, analytical individual, but that also stunted his emotional intelligence. Yeah. Like, if for those in the audience who aren't aware of the difference between traditionalism, behavioralism, and post-behavioralism, there are three different ways of approaching the idea of data collection. Traditionalism says that if it's legal, it's moral, which is obviously false. Behavioralism says that right. Behavioralism says that if you can prove it with math, then it's moral, which is also false, because one of my favorite books by one of my favorite authors, Kathy O'Neill, with her book Weapons of Math Destruction, talks about the dangers of mathematical models by describing it as models are opinions embedded in mathematics. For an example of such an event, you have Dwayne Buck down in Texas, who is still serving a time on death row nowadays, who was up for parole in about 1996, I believe. And when he was supposed to go on parole, the Texas government brought in a psychologist, which used collected data, which states that a black man who was arrested for a violent crime, if released and returned back to his neighborhood, is more likely to commit the crime and return back to prison in the first place. So thus, it was statistically infeasible to release Dwayne Buck from prison, and by data collection and Texas fucking logic, it was more choice to keep him in prison for the rest of his life. Now, how this manifests even further in my own personal experience is this individual's talking about how, amongst other things, about how he believed that America had the highest form of economic mobility on the planet. I explained to him, from my subjective experience coming from the ghetto, that's not the case. If you're born broke, you stay broke. And he told me the data did not agree with my experiences, so my experiences are wrong. Right. So that right there is inherently the most destructive, bigoted, and racist thing anybody can do. You can call me a nigger all day. I'll still slap you. But the minute you do that, that is active destruction, because that right there completely gaslights and completely just invalidates the entirety of BIPOC struggles by saying that because the data of some rich white man doesn't agree with my experience as a colonized individual in the United States, is about as big as it can get. Now,
Yeah, I mean, that's really. If you mind if I just say one thing real quick,
go for it.
besides having a bachelor's degree in philosophy, I'm about a thesis paper away from a master's degree in system science, and there's a lot of data analysis and model constructing and so on and so forth. So I know exactly what you're talking about. Going back to the guy in Texas, where statistically, supposedly, black men released from jail for whatever crime will go back to the same area and do it again, is like that's clearly a fallacious data set. And because like it's an arbitrary move to circle around black men in the first place. Why not say men? He's a man too. Why not American man? He's those things as well. So to single out his color, his race is completely arbitrary and bullshit. Okay, sorry. That struck me.
No.
Like you got to be fucking, like nobody sees that that's a problem.
Right. Trust me. Like the only reason I'm calm about this now is because I've already raged about this enough that I can't do that anymore. So trust me. I almost went to jail that day.
I got you. Yeah.
Oh, dear.
All right, where were we? So I'm sorry about that.
No, it's fine. It's a sign of a good conversation, but it's probably annoying the audience right now that we forgot the topic. It was we were talking about
well, we were talking about models being fallacious.
Yes.
And about somebody's opinion.
Yep, talk about intersectionality and one of the many opportunities that TSC
You punch a motherfucker, right? Got that.
But we have run into issues of it's never malicious, but issues of not racism, but insensitivity within TST. White members of TST acting some kind of way and not realizing that the way they're acting is a beta kind of fashion mainly because they just don't know. They just don't know. Like it's like most liberals are raised to view inherently racist ideas as like open-minded ideas, as ideas that promote egalitarianism. So when they promote those racist ideas around like BIPOC individuals, they're not going to know that they're, for instance, gun rights. Second, gun restrictions are in every way, shape, and form, any capacity, point blank, racist.
100%. It's like the war on drugs, same fucking thing.
Yes. The only reason gun laws started to come into the United States in the first place is because the Mulford Act of 1968, when California, which despite California lauding itself as a liberal area, well, it is a liberal area, not ignoring the fact that liberals are more, in my opinion, more racist than conservatives. Was California's attempt at disarming the Black Panther Party.
I saw exactly what it was.
Yep. So white folks need education on how to be proper allies, because improper allies are more destructive than proper enemies, if I'm being frank. And we only have about 2 minutes left for 8. And I mean, so again, it's just an excuse. It's just an excuse to come back on the show in the future if you'll have me.
Absolutely, dude. Like many. This is great. This is fantastic. I applaud your ability to articulate so many ideas within a specific amount of time. That's great.
I'm just grateful. I'm just grateful I didn't disappoint. I was worried I was going to disappoint.
Not even close. This is great. Yeah. Well, why don't we? This is actually a nice stopping point. Okay, since we're sort of just patting ourselves on the back. Yes, let's have you back on for sure. Give real quick, like maybe email address, website, something or another for the temple, the Satanic Temple, if people are curious about it.
If you're curious about the Satanic Temple, I would highly recommend going to the Satanic Temple website. You have the satanictemple.tv. We have a streaming service, a legitimate streaming service. We have the archives of the Satanic Temple where you can go and watch past services, such as some of my own services I've presented in the past on intersectionality and a lot of the topics we talked about tonight. And if you want for my specific congregation, the Satanic Temple of Missouri, you can go on Facebook, go on the Satanic Temple of Missouri congregation website. You can find me on Twitter and Facebook. I usually try to be active and engaged in the audience. For Kristoff, Samael, Faust. Other than that, I'm sure I'll be if I'm on in the if I guess when I'm on in the future, I'll answer any further questions on how to contact us. I mean, we don't proselytize, that's our thing. We don't recruit, but we are more than happy to accept interested individuals.
You live in Missouri?
I currently do, yes.
Wow. That's okay. I mean, it's all. I mean, just that's an extreme. You're a very brave person, I think. Which I think you're very. I mean, that's very cool. You're like the heart of like American ignorance is like just I mean just and bigotry, a black Marxist Satanist in Missouri. Holy shit, that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. I tell folks all the time I'm grateful I was born like in the 21st century because I would not have made it past the age of 18 anytime before 1980.
Exactly. Holy fuck. Missouri's supposed to be beautiful. I don't want to be totally negative about it. But I mean, the whole area of Alabama, Louisiana. I mean, socio-political, economic ideology aside, it's supposed to be a gorgeous area.
Oh yeah, the people
And there's
suck.
plenty of good people down there, I'm sure. I mean, it's probably not as bad as it used to be.
Yeah, but the good people out here will tell you that everybody else sucks though. So.
Okay, well, exactly. Really quick, Christine, she says she's spiritual. She doesn't mess with anything dark. And real quick, before we end this, I just want to say there's a big difference between darkness does not, in the spiritual sense or in the magical sense, occult sense, does not mean evil. It doesn't mean immoral. Dark imagery. I mean, there's all sorts of dark. I mean, you can have dark imagery of angelic forms, and it can be very beautiful. And demons aren't necessarily out to get you either. I mean, we could talk about like satanic mythology for fucking decades, man. And again, maybe we'll just have you back on. We'll do that some other time too. But anyway, so if you're interested in like learning more about this, go to the temple, the Satanic Temple. You can refer to my Facebook page. I'm always posting shit. I teach classes on all sorts of this stuff. So that'd be cool too. Anyway, brother Kristoff, and I love the name Kristoff, by the way. Samuel Faust, thank you for coming on the show. Hang on 1 second after I end this. I just want to get some one more question off air. Thank you for everybody tuning in to the Gadfly. Till next time, remember, if it can be destroyed by the truth, it should be. All right, take care.
Hail Satan.
Hail Satan. Fuck yeah, bro. What do I think?